मैं मंच पर आमंत्रित करना चाहूँगा उन विशेषज्ञ को जिनकी सोच और मार्गदर्शन भारत की आर्थिक दिशा तय करने में बेहद अहम है। वी अनंता नागेश्वरन भारत सरकार के मुख्य आर्थिक सलाहकार हैं, जो कि अर्थव्यवस्था को समझने के साथ साथ उद्यमियों और नए कारोबार के लिए सही माहौल बनाने पर लगातार काम कर रहे हैं। और इंडिया एट 2047 की जो हम बात कर रहे हैं उसमें उनका योगदान बड़ा महत्वपूर्ण है। तो सर, आपको हम सादर आमंत्रित कर रहे हैं मंच पर, और वी अनंता नागेश्वरन जी से बात करेंगे हमारे सहयोगी चंदन। आप दोनों का बहुत स्वागत है मंच पर।
बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया अवधेश। और यहाँ बताना चाहेंगे हमारे सभी दर्शकों को कि सर ने बहुत अपना कीमती समय जो है निकाला है हमारे लिए, और इसके लिए आप लोगों को सभी को उनका तालियों से स्वागत करना चाहिए। सर, थैंक यू वेरी मच फॉर कमिंग टू एबीपी नेटवर्क। सर अभी बहुत ज़्यादा बिजी थे आर्थिक सर्वेक्षण जो इकोनॉमिक सर्वे होता है उसके लिए, और उसके बीच से हमारी पॉलिटिकल एडिटर मेघा प्रसाद जी ने उनको यहाँ पर आमंत्रित किया, और एक तरह से कहा जाए कि बिल्कुल खींच करके लाए हैं। सर, थैंक यू वेरी मच फॉर कमिंग टू अस। एंड फर्स्ट क्वेश्चन, in the front of economy, India has done exceptionally well. 8.2% GDP growth in last quarter. It was exceptionally well. We would like to congratulate you. It is your vision. But in order to reach the goal of 2047 and developed country, we need this consistent growth for 7 to 8% for next decade or so. What is the vision for that, sir?
Thank you for having me here, and my apologies. My Hindi is not so good. That's why I requested you to speak to me in English, and thank you for doing that. My apologies to the audience also for that. And as for your congratulations, I think that rightly belongs to the Honorable PM and the Council of Ministers and not to me. But as far as the outlook is concerned, I think while definitely the higher the growth rate, the better it is for us, we also need to be realistic and mindful of the geopolitical circumstances. Some of the certitudes of the last 80 years may not be with us going forward. And that will cast their own shadow on trade flows and capital flows across borders. Therefore, I think we need to be realistic also, and that's a good balance to have. I think to be able to achieve 7% consistent growth rate in real terms is possible. And I used to think even 2-3 years ago that 6.5% was more realistic, but I have become more optimistic. Now I feel 7% is doable because of some of the important reforms we have undertaken. Infrastructure investment, physical, digital, ease of doing business, and more importantly now the labor laws being notified, etc. And then the indirect and direct tax relief given in the budget in February and then later in September, etc. So I think sustaining 7% real GDP growth and then hoping to do better than that, that is a realistic frame for us to have for the coming years.
Sir, in last economic survey, the focus was on capex and rural demand, and it has paid really well. When the capex was increased to the huge amount, then we were all surprised, and it has paid. But what is the vision for the next economic survey? And in which areas you will focus, and our economy will focus on which sectors precisely?
So I think the emphasis on capital investment as far as the government is concerned will remain. Because as a country with a per capita income of $2,700 and aspiring to grow it manifold, the importance of public investment can never go down. But the last economic survey in January 2025, we put a lot of emphasis on deregulation, and I think that is also happening. As we know, there are efforts going on at the state level, and then there is a high-level committee on deregulation at the union ministry level. So that will also be important. Sector-wise, I think India cannot have one strategy for the whole country, because if you look at the recent book that my predecessor, Mr. Arvind Subramaniam and Professor Devesh Kapoor wrote, A Sixth of Humanity, which came out recently, they make a very interesting point. 1/3 of India, and by that they mean southern states, Haryana, Gujarat, and Maharashtra, 1/3 of India, they say, has actually grown at a rate similar to or faster than India, or faster than China, and for as long as China has done. So 1/3 of India has been able to emulate the Chinese impressive macroeconomic growth performance. So those states will have to have a different strategy and different focus on sectors, capital intensive, high tech, etc. And there are states which are still in the catch-up mode. And they can focus on labor-intensive manufacturing, labor-intensive services, etc. So there cannot be a catch-all strategy for the whole country or sector-specific attention. It has to be state-specific.
Sir, if we talk about the manufacturing sector, it has been improving since a couple of years, but it is still not up to the par. Or if we talk about our competitors like China or other countries, government has given incentives like PLI schemes, and it is focusing on that. But still, we are catching up. How long will lag behind? And because manufacturing sector is the most important sector, it can only drive us towards a developed economy.
No, I agree with you. Manufacturing is important, will be important. If you look at countries that have had strong currencies in the past, they have had a very strong manufacturing base and also manufacturing export base. So we need to have that. Having said that, we have to contend with the reality that in the last 5 to 6 years or even slightly longer, pre-COVID as well, China has systematically expanded its manufacturing presence in several areas and therefore has made it that much more challenging for other countries to be able to establish their presence in those areas. And we have to contend with that, which means we have to up our game much more than we would otherwise have been required to do so. Just before coming here, I was reading an article in Nikkei Asia about the risk of deindustrialization in Thailand, for example. It's an article in Nikkei Asia. Just to underscore the point that the challenge is quite immense and is faced by many countries across the world. Considering that, in real terms, India's manufacturing share of gross value added, GVA, has remained stable at 17 to 18%. Only when you look at manufacturing GVA share, in nominal terms, it appears as if it has come down from 17% down to 12 or 13%. And that's precisely because year after year, agriculture products like rice and wheat get regular price increases, MSP. Manufacturing, on the other hand, is subject to international competition, technological upgradation, productivity improvements. So manufacturing goods prices will either experience very low inflation year after year, or may even experience deflation. That is why when you measure the share of manufacturing in GVA in current prices, you get a different picture, a distorted picture. That is why it's important to look at manufacturing in constant price terms. On that basis, India's manufacturing share has not gone down. But having said that, we need to increase it to 25% of GDP. In the budget last year, the government announced a national manufacturing mission, the focus on deregulation, the two new research funds announced by the government, ANRF, RDIF, all of these things will have to coalesce to raise our manufacturing share of GVA.
Sir, as you have mentioned the international scenarios as well, recently we have seen that Mexico has imposed a tariff on us. Until that, they were not charging us that much tariff. If we talk about US, right, it is a paradox. On one side, US's policy paper says that India is a partner and we need to have a good relationship with India in economic terms and everything. And on the other hand, we had seen that when a question was put up to President Trump about the rice thing, rice dumping, several countries' names were mentioned, Thailand, China, India. But President Trump singled out India, what India was doing. Why this paradox, sir? At one side, we are a global partner, we are a strategic partner, and on the other hand, we are being targeted.
No, I think it's a very good question. The answer is more nuanced, and perhaps the Ministry of External Affairs colleagues of mine are better placed to provide you the right answer. I can only say in personal terms, I think countries will obviously be trying to pursue both strategic goals and near-term transactional goals. That is what we are seeing here.
Trade deal. We have been chasing it from February 25, and we were the earlier birds at that in America. Prime Minister Modi was there, but still the deal has not been sealed. Every time the new date comes, and we are just waiting for that, our markets are waiting, our business enterprises are waiting because they are suffering because of that 50% tariff. Is there any timeline or is there an expectation? Give it a later date. At least we'll be sure that by that time we'll be able to seal the deal.
So they say, you know, in English, once bitten, twice shy, or I am twice bitten, thrice shy now. Because whenever, as a normal, ordinary Indian, when I express the hope or the desire to see the trade agreement come to fruition, I get quoted out of context as if I am able to give a timeline, as if I have some sort of an inside track as to what is happening. None of which is true. So the real people who are working very hard to get a deal done is the people in Ministry of Commerce and Industry, and they are the right ones to be able to have a better sense of what the timeline is. As I said many a time, it's our hope that it is done sooner rather than later, but to be able to put a timeline, it's very, very difficult because it's as much a matter of trade, it's as much a question of trade matters as it is one of geopolitics as well.
Sir, the supplementary question. What could be the possible tariff which we will be settled with America?
That again is a question that the industry only can answer. I mean, I think from what I gathered, again, it is not my view, from what I gathered from the industry people is that when the first reciprocal tariff of 25% was announced, while that was higher than what industry was expecting, there was a feeling that they could live with it. That was what the feedback I got from the industry.
Sir, another pressing issue is regarding the downfall of rupees. Because today it is 90.56 rupees against a dollar. But previously, RBI was trying to arrest the decline, and they were selling the dollar in the open market, but after 90 barrier was breached, they have stopped it. Are we doing something in that area? Can we do something, or we have to wait to reach it till 100?
Look. No. It is not that there is a particular number and all that in terms of the target or anything like that. So I think in general, countries, when they try to defend a currency from depreciating, they put up the interest rate. So that is not something that we want to see happen because inflation is quite low and we need lower cost of capital, so we need lower interest rates. So we cannot have a monetary policy that is focused only on the currency because we are a large economy. A domestic economy is much bigger than the external economy of India, and therefore the monetary policy, if anything, in the last meeting last week, they cut interest rates. So in theory, and I did my doctoral dissertation on exchange rates. In theory, if you want to defend the exchange rate, then you put up interest rates, but then that will hurt the macro economy. So that is not the route to go. So why is the currency depreciating? I mean, if anything, historically, if you look at it, countries that have experienced a strong currency in general are the ones that have had a huge domestic savings rate, current account surplus, etc. As long as we are a current account deficit country, we need external capital to finance our imports. The external capital can be either foreign direct investment or foreign portfolio investment. Foreign direct investment has been coming in good quantity, in good dollar value over the years. If anything, gross inflows have been rising. But equally, investors who have put in money 20, 30, 40 years ago are now seeing an opportunity to take profits, and the Indian stock market boom has enabled them to exit their investments also. The third factor is Indian producers now, because of changing geopolitical circumstances, are compelled to think of investing overseas to be able to sell in those markets. Otherwise, they have problems in exporting from here because of changing circumstances. The other factor to keep in mind is interest rates between 2009 and 2020 were close to zero everywhere in the developed world. Now they have gone up to between 4 and 5%. That also changes the dynamics of capital flows. So if we are a trade deficit country, you need capital flows, and the dynamics of capital flows in the world has changed or is changing. And that is what sometimes leads to balance of payment deficit. And this is a balance of payment deficit year. So India has excellent macroeconomic fundamentals, growth rates, low inflation, banking system is in very good health, and the foreign reserves are very high. But in spite of that, because we need external flows to finance our imports and growth, when the external flows become a bit more difficult to come by, the currency will naturally come under pressure.
Sir, you have covered my two questions on current account deficit as well as FDI figures, because I was about to ask these questions. Sir, our economy is growing because of our domestic consumptions,
Right.
and our rural demand is growing.
And domestic investments.
Domestic investment as well, yes. But if we are competing with the global economies and our current account deficit is widening over the years, how will we become the developed country? Because if our currency is depreciating, it means that on the real term, right, the value of our economy, if it is growing, but it is reducing because of the depreciation of our rupees as well. So
No, I think it's a very good question. It's a nuanced question, and it requires a very labored answer. But in the interest of time, I'll try to give you a brief answer, but then the risk is that the nuance is lost. Running a current account deficit is not a barrier to becoming a developed country, as long as capital flows are ample. But the problem is the geopolitical shifts may also make capital flows more difficult in the coming years compared to the last 30, 40 years. And that is why, therefore, India has to have a very strong export orientation.
exactly, sir.
And that requires a growth in manufacturing sector, investment in R&D, and a long-term mindset on the part of the Indian businesses. Because unless you have a long-term mindset, you will not invest in competitiveness, quality, innovation, R&D. So that is the way to basically marry our growth aspirations with the changing geopolitical circumstances, which will make it difficult for us to access global capital.
There is no doubt, sir, that the situation in the global scenario is quite turbulent for past couple of years, and our economy is doing quite well, and we are navigating well. The question which is quite convenient for you now, for inflation, there is just now we have got the data that wholesale price inflation has come down. So it is quite satisfactory at the moment, but we are 140 billion people economy, and we have 140 million mouth to feed. So what is the vision to keep the economy, this inflation in check for upcoming years? Because our population is rising, so are the things, resources are scarce. So in future also, what is the vision to keep the inflation in check?
Sure. I mean, inflation is kept in check by a combination of factors. One, you have to have a supply-rich economy. And the investments we have made in the last 11 years on physical infrastructure is precisely meant to address your question that we should make India a less supply-constrained economy. And one simple statistic will give you the achievement that this government has made in the last 11 years on that. Between 1947, when we got independence, and 2014, we built 74 airports in 67 years. And in the next 11 years, between 2014 and 2025, we more than doubled that number to 159 airports. So it is just one example, and you can add the total length of highway kilometers built, the power generation capacity added, the improvement in port infrastructure, which has reduced the turnaround time. These are all examples whereby you increase and augment the supply side capability of the economy to meet rising demand growth because of a young population and growing population, which is what will keep prices under control. So that is one. Second is productivity. And the third is to run a fiscal policy that is responsible, prudent, because ultimately rising fiscal deficits will make inflation a bigger risk. And this government has brought down the fiscal deficit from 9.2% of GDP to an expected 4.4% of GDP this year. And lastly, we have a monetary policy framework which targets the inflation rate. So ultimately, the long-term answer to inflation is productivity and an augmented supply side of the economy. In the short run, it is about responsible fiscal and monetary policy. For us, luckily, we tick all these boxes at this point in time.
Sir, another thing is employment, or rather we say unemployment, because if we see the data, It is quite convenient, and government says that everything is fine, and it is 5 point something at the moment unemployment rate. So it is quite comfortable for the economy like India. But the opposition says that it is a jobless growth, and also it is said that we have the skill gap as well. That we do have jobs, but we don't have skilled people. Another thing is that the jobs are there, but the quality is not there. Like the salary is not there. An engineer is doing that gig work. Also, it is said that when there is a fourth class vacancy in the government sector, we can see the lakhs of people are applying for that, and overqualified people are applying for that. So, how do you address this concern, sir?
Oh, you have packed a lot into this one question. So, first of all, it is not jobless growth, because I'll give you one simple example. The Business Standard newspaper as well took note of it and acknowledged it. In the last 1 year or even longer, the Rural Employment Guarantee Program, Manrega demand has been coming down. If it is jobless growth, Manrega demand will not be going down. So that is a very effective response to the charge that this is a jobless growth. Now, there are private sector estimates apart from what the Ministry of Statistics puts out in the periodic labor force survey data. Private sector reports like Center for Monitoring Indian Economy, CMIE, etc. have also acknowledged that in the last 2 financial years, job growth has been of the order, in the formal sector by the way, not including agriculture, in the formal sector, job growth has been of the order of 1.5 crores or 15 million on average in 23-24 and 24-25. Which is double the estimate of 8 million that we put out as a required minimum job creation in the non-agricultural sectors of the economy for us to be able to satisfy the demographic profile. So in that sense, in the last 2 financial years, we have actually had better growth rates. That brings me to the other question which you raised. Some of it could be gig economy, which means you are saying people who are qualified may be taking up gig work because they have no commensurate jobs, or it could be the case that they prefer the flexibility. They prefer the entrepreneurial model, which comes with the gig work. You have more flexibility to undertake, to upgrade, upskill yourself, and still earn some money as well. So I think the labor market picture is a nuanced one, and state governments and the union government have been deregulating in the last 1 to 2 years much more enthusiastically than before, which will further facilitate job creation. And income growth in the, for workers is both a function of economic growth and also specific skill levels. So upskilling has to be a continuous part of the labor force for them to be able to get the wage growth commensurate with their productivity.
Sir, another challenging aspect is government debt. It is significantly rising over the years, and if we compare it to 2014 and 2025, we see it has reached a big level. Although it is already under control, if we talk about debt to GDP ratio, it is quite comfortable, but still it has increased significantly. And as a country, India is a different country, and it's a particular country. Are we addressing as a government, or we are okay with that, this debt is fine with us?
So the debt to GDP ratio has not been rising. If anything, during COVID, it went up very sharply. Yes. And in the next 5 years, it has been coming down, not just at the union government level, but including the state government. We are about 81% of GDP. It went to as high as 87, 88% during COVID years. So it's been coming down. Now, at the union government level, we expect this to come down to 50% of GDP. And then with the state governments probably around 20% of GDP, we hope that by the end of this decade, the overall debt to GDP ratio will come down to 70% of GDP, or maybe slightly lower if we are lucky. And this comes through 2 parts. One is, of course, through the growth in denominator, GDP. And the numerator part of it will naturally have to come through better tax collection, better interest rate management, changing the profile of the debt. These are all micro decisions, but on a macro basis, it also requires augmenting non-tax revenues, etc. So there are multiple approaches required to bring down the debt to GDP ratio. I concede that for a country of our credit rating, BBB, it is on the higher side, but the trend is on the right way. It is going down since the highs of COVID.
Okay. The next question is, it includes economics as well as politics also, because we talk about the freebies scheme. Like it is all set, we can say in Hindi that it is Ramband. Like a political tool to win the elections, all the parties are relying on freebies. And in the order of freebies, the fiscal discipline bleeds. And our economy has to bear the brunt of freebies. So what is the vision on that? Are we continuing with all these things or enhancing these populist schemes, or we are going to control in near future?
So one thing is, statistically, the freebies are not straining the fiscal system because states have very strong fiscal rules. So what happens is when freebies increase, the overall deficit spending of state governments doesn't increase, but what happens is that the composition of their spending changes. The revenue expenditure share goes up and the capital expenditure share goes down. That is the downside of it. The second dimension is, of course, freebies sometimes play an important part. When demand is weak, freebies are a form of fiscal transfer which supports aggregate demand growth, and some of it therefore comes back as tax revenue to the states from indirect taxes or direct taxes. Even then, the net effect is that it changes the composition and the quality of fiscal expenditure on the part of states. That's one point. The other dimension is whether it is for households or businesses. Whenever some sort of concession or transfer or freebies or tax rebates, whatever is given, the important thing is not to question that those transfers themselves from the government, but to ask what is the quid pro quo on the part of the recipients. Now, in the case of businesses, it should be productivity growth, export performance, employment generation. On the part of households, the quid pro quo should be, in fact, more related to their own self-improvement. Investment in physical health, investment in mental health, investment in upskilling, investment in consuming nutritious food, etc., or education. So these are all the kind of quid pro quo that governments can demand from households in return for the freebie, so that the overall quality of the population and the labor force goes up, and that is a good bargain to have.
Questions are being put up that instead of giving the cash benefits to the people, wouldn't it be appropriate to create more jobs for that? That amount is diverted in creating more jobs, and that will be the appropriate measure.
No, it is not a mutually exclusive thing. We can do both, and governments are doing both. Because job creation is facilitated by governments through deregulation and creating an economy wherein businesses can grow, particularly small and medium enterprises, because they are the ones who create the jobs. And that is why the deregulation drive, both in the union and state governments, is very important. Because deregulation makes it possible for businesses to grow without being afraid of facing higher compliance requirements, and therefore they grow the business and hire more people. And simultaneously that brings in more tax revenues, and you can support, using that you can support the underserved segments of the population and bring them up to participate in the national mainstream. So both are not mutually exclusive.
Sir, the session is based on making the business easier. But in recent years, the trend has been that people are leaving India, businesses are leaving India. It is being said by some of the experts. And so are we going in the right direction of making things easier for the businesses, or are we making things difficult for them? And they are looking for the different options, and that could be the reason that our that net FDI is getting it is decreasing over the years. Is that the reason behind that?
No, I don't think this is the reason behind the net FDI going down. We discussed it a few minutes ago. Multiple factors are contributing: profit-taking, higher interest rates, geopolitical changes, etc. I don't think we should make the mistake of amplifying anecdotal or small bits of data, because this pattern of people emigrating for better economic opportunities elsewhere has been a long-standing phenomena, and it is not a one-way traffic. They come back with more knowledge, more resources, some of them invest back, etc. And as a percentage of population, or as a percentage of wealth that is created in the economy, the wealth, quote unquote, that leaves the country is not going up, but it is going down. And this is a phenomena now you are seeing in many countries across the world. So this statistic has to be put in perspective. We cannot take it out of context and amplify it.
Sir, the next issue is AI. When computers came, questions were put up like that, it is a boon or bane. It was quite exceptionally, we have done well, and we have, it was revolutionary for India. Regarding the AI, it poses challenges for the short term. It may be beneficial for us in long time, but immediately, what is the vision for government for upskilling and reskilling our existing workforce, which is the younger one, so that we can cope with the AI onslaught on recent jobs and create the new jobs as well?
So first of all, I think whether it is a boon or a bane is something that we will know only in due course. They're still very early days. So there is a lot of speculation, both on the negative side and on the positive side, and we need more evidence to emerge to determine which side is going to dominate, the boon side or the bane side. We don't know yet. The government of India has an AI mission in general that is more to do with the computing power, creating India's own large language models, etc. And separately, 5 centers of AI excellence have been created for application purposes in specific areas. And now, NCERT and school education, state education boards are now introducing curriculum related to AI from middle school level onwards. So, the fourth dimension, which is where we should be focusing on as well, apart from being able to take advantage of AI, is to focus on areas where AI will not have an impact, where manual and human presence will be valued. It is in therefore human-centric services and human-centric physical skills, whether it is plumbing, electrical, carpentry, civil engineering, geology, construction, etc. All these areas, I think human services are more important, and we need to also therefore ensure that our youth take up those areas where they will be somewhat insulated from the AI dominance if it comes about. AI's threat, if it really turns out to be ubiquitous, if AI becomes cheap enough and affordable enough to be deployed everywhere in the world, including in India, then the biggest challenge will come for cognitive jobs. Therefore, it is important for us to train our youth in non-cognitive jobs and non-cognitive skills and roles. So therefore, the approach to AI has to be a multifaceted one. We are addressing quite a few parts of it. There are still some more parts that need attention.
Sir, regarding upskilling and reskilling, are we relying on the businesses to do that work for us? Or government is taking itself, taking the metal itself to educate and guide the people, youth, regarding the AI thing?
No, it is happening in both ways. Private sector is doing its part. The government, as I mentioned to you, has created this 5 centers of excellence in AI, and school, state and union government education syllabuses and curriculum, both in higher education institutions and school level, they are being refashioned to be able to prepare the students and the youth for participating in the AI world. So it is happening. And separately, as I said, the government is also creating the AI for Bharat mission, etc. And IIT, Mumbai, Kanpur, Chennai, all of them are participating in different initiatives related to AI. One is computing power, one is developing local language models and large language models. So the initiatives are academic, industry and government. It's a joint effort.
Sir, next question will be your favorite. India has already crossed the 4 trillion economy mark, because exact data will come in next year. But in how much time we expect to become the 10 trillion economy or 20 trillion economy? Because yes, we are happy that we are rapidly growing, but China is 4 times or more than that, the larger economy than us. We cannot even talk about US, because that is 30 trillion economy at the moment. So in how much time we can reach that mark of 10 trillion at least?
So again, this is another multi-layered question. So first of all, we are at 3.9 trillion as of March 2025. By March 2026, we will be somewhere around between 4.1 to 4.3 in dollar terms, because the exchange rate this year, the rupee has weakened.
Yes.
So the level of dollar GDP that we will get to by March 26 will be influenced by the exchange rate. But nonetheless, the International Monetary Fund projects that India will be a $6.6 trillion economy by March 2031. So by the middle of the next decade, we should be looking at the economy which is somewhere of the size of between 8 and $10 trillion, around 2036 or so. But please understand that these numbers are indicative, because the world is changing very rapidly. The certainties of the last 40 years of globalization, peaceful globalization, is giving way to fragmentation, a fractious world. Capital and trade flows are going to be segmented rather than integrated. So in all these aspects, therefore, prediction becomes that much more difficult and hazardous. I think we should focus more on, and this may sound very philosophical, but honestly, it's also practical. We should focus on all the right things that we need to do, whether it is investment in skilling, R&D, quality, innovation, competitiveness, and on the government side, deregulation and improving state capability to execute projects, etc. We need to do all of that. The outcomes will depend on a combination of these and external factors which are beyond our control. So I think we should use these milestones as some sort of inspirational targets, but it cannot be unlike in the case of a company whose variables are relatively limited in comparison to a nation of our size. So the target should not become a sort of an obsession. They have to be useful guiding post.
Sir, can you please name some structural reforms which we need to acquire in recent future so that we can achieve okay, we are not getting passionate about the goals, but still, what will be the structural reforms?
No, the structural reforms, most of them are in the area of factors of production, which is land and labor. So the labor code is a very important milestone here, and states have already been at it. Now the union government notifying it gives them a further elbow room or degrees of freedom to go further, because our focus should be not just on, I'm not saying it should not be, our focus should be equally on creating jobs as it is to protect the rights of those who already have a job. So that's a trade-off that we have to maintain, and the labor codes enable the employers and the employees to strike the right balance between preserving and protecting the rights of those who have a job to protecting the rights of people to have a job. So both need to be balanced. The other is land reforms, which is about especially land use conversion, which is a state government domain. Much of the delays and the expense involved in setting up factories is due to the land use conversion difficulties and challenges. The third area of structural reform will also be in ensuring power generation and distribution being economically viable. That is another area which is in the domain of states. The fourth structural reform area is not a reform as such, a policy priority I would call it, is not only skilling and education, but also in ensuring the emotional, mental and physical health of our youth. And that is where much of the work needs to happen.
Sir, all the economic questions I have already exhausted, but I'm tempted to ask the last question about China. Because in the social media, as we were discussing that your statement was all over there, we should see China as what, like frenemy, competitor or enemy?
No, this is again, as you said, you don't get to choose your geography or your neighbors, and they have achieved a lot of manufacturing competence and sufficiency, not only to meet their domestic demand, but also global demand. And we import a lot of primary and intermediate goods from them, infrastructure goods as well. So we need to find ways to therefore deal with the differences. At the same time, we need to be able to engage with them in commerce as well. And that is what the government has been doing.
Thank you very much, sir. और बहुत शुक्रिया अदा करना चाहेंगे हमारे साथ मुख्य आर्थिक सलाहकार नागेश्वरन जी जुड़े और उन्होंने बहुत विस्तार से हमारे सभी सवालों का जवाब दिया। और उम्मीद हम ये करते हैं कि आर्थिक मंच पर जब आर्थिक सर्वेक्षण की तैयारी के बीच से उन्होंने समय निकाला है तो निश्चित तौर पर हमें जो बातें उन्होंने कही हैं आर्थिक सर्वेक्षण में देखने को मिलेगा। और जो 8.2% की ग्रोथ विकास दर हमने पिछले सेक्टर में हासिल की है, पिछले तिमाही में हासिल की है, ये और बेहतर हो और हमारा देश विकास के रास्ते पर आगे बढ़े और बिजनेस हमारा आगे बढ़ता रहे। और सर का कहना है, I would like to quote you, sir, that we should not follow the others format, other countries' development formats, and we have to get our own format. That will be the Indian format, and other countries will follow that.
No, you're absolutely right. Because of our uniqueness in terms of size and achieving an economic transformation within the democratic framework and our size, this is a very unique combination. Therefore, it has to be a uniquely Indian synthesis growth model.
थैंक यू वेरी मच सर, बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया आपका एबीपी न्यूज पर आने के लिए और हमारे दर्शकों के साथ खुलकर अपनी बात करने के लिए, विस्तार से बात करने के लिए।
एबीपी न्यूज आपको रखे आगे।